Test,
Testing. One,
Test.
2, 3.
test, test. Is that? All right, welcome everybody to our June PIO meeting. Let's see, if this is your first time, welcome. We've got food and drinks over there, help yourself. We've got Wi-Fi code over on the whiteboard. Bathrooms are up the stairs. There's additional drinks in the fridge through that door right there in the maintenance room or electrical room. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Source Allies. We meet every fourth Tuesday of the month. We've got exciting things planned out for the next 3 months. So watch our socials. We've got QR codes sitting around piowa.org. So keep an eye on those for updates. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Ben.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. And thanks, Matt, for letting me come speak and talk. So just a little bit about background. My background is in multimedia, TV, content creation stuff. I found my way doing enablement content for startups for the last little bit. And then I partnered up with Rachel Rowland, who you're going to meet in just a few seconds up on screen. We've been working for her bootstrap startup Redbud for the last 2 years now, I think, doing all sorts of bespoke AI machine learning configurations, some agentic stuff, marketing intelligence, that sort of thing. So I hate using this, but my value prop is like, hey, I'm a multimedia guy, but I speak nerd. So it's been fun for me personally to kind of like peek behind the hood at the forefront of this technology. So Rachel's gonna hop in here. She's gonna give us just some overview of stuff that she's been working on as it relates to storage and Python. And I was kind of hoping we could just see where the conversation takes us. Rachel's a very senior engineer and developer, and I think based on what I've seen, there's not a ton of people in the world that's doing the stuff that she could do. So if anybody has any questions or anything as we're going, for sure, just want to have some fun with this evening and kind of get to know each other a little bit. Only bad thing is Rachel cannot hear us through the stream. So I'll have to kind of relay some stuff either in chat or via microphone. So I'm going to text her and say we're ready. And we'll see where the evening takes us.
Hello. Hi.
Everybody says hi, Rachel.
Well, hi everybody. Sadly I can't see you, so it's hard to know what's going on, but hi anyway. I'm here, and Ben, if you want to kick us off, yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I kicked us off by giving him the whole intro spiel, talking about your seniority as a AI scientist, your background, what we've been doing together loosely. Pizza here, so that's good. So yeah, if you want to just give a quick intro, let the folks know who you are and just a tiny bit about your background.
So I have primarily been in software development for a very long time. We'll just call it the 90s and leave it at that. About 8 years ago, I started a company to work full time doing data science, machine learning, statistics, and things of that nature, and ended up getting into marketing research primarily. And currently I'm working on retainer for an ad agency, and I built a product with them that we could discuss. Maybe more interestingly for this group, I've recently been doing a lot of workflow automation for companies that are like big enough to have an ERP, but not big enough to have like SAP, right? So think of like backwater ERPs. There's a lot of market there. The C-suite, the senior executives are open to discussing that. And where we are with sort of software, data science, and generative AI, there's just a lot we can do on the workflow automation side. And I think that the biggest lever that I'm pulling right now is how I approach development from you could call it an AI first mentality. And I'm happy to delve into any of that that's interesting to the audience.
Sounds awesome. So let me pull the room real quick. Does anybody here work with or on ERP systems at all? Totally okay. Oh, there you went, Rachel. So Rachel, what ERP systems are you working on right now?
Sorry, my dogs are barking. They get confused and think if I get up, they think people are here. Anyway, yeah. So right now I'm working on the primary one that I'm working on today is called Point of Rental, and Point of Rental is a software, a SaaS company that has an ERP specifically targeted at companies that do heavy equipment rental. And so just to give you an idea, the project that I'm working on is simply synchronizing HubSpot with Point of Rental, which means things like, hey, we have a new customer that comes in, and that needs to live in both HubSpot and Point of Rental, right? And just think of it like Point of Rental has, let's say, 25 API endpoints, and HubSpot has, I don't know, let's just say 40, right? And so basically this company is going to pay me on a per, entity basis to integrate those two, which for me, and with how I approach things is a very simple technical problem, right? The hardest problem is really the human problem, and that's getting two things, right? One is API access to email, right? So I can watch an email inbox, and then, or whatever it is. And then I need API access to HubSpot and API access to Point of Rental. My customers are somewhat tech savvy, but they're not enterprise Fortune 500 savvy, right? So it's the hardest part is always the human part. And that's like just getting access to what I need to, move forward or to keep the C-suite's attention. The C-suite attention is like the number one for me. But
usually go through ERP in general.
Oh, sure. So Rachel, a question from the audience. They're asking, can you give us a quick overview of what ERP stands for and what it is?
Yeah, so that's just it's an old term for enterprise resource planning. And is the audience familiar with a company called SAP? Anybody?
Somebody said unfortunately.
Correct. Okay. So SAP is the world premier example of a large company ERP. And SAP is famous for taking over the whole company. Meaning, if your senior management signs off on SAP, like watch out, because you have to change to run SAP, right? It takes over your life, and that's the goal. And so Point of Rental is just a very targeted ERP that is, for smaller companies that just do equipment rental, right? So it's very targeted, has very, specific capabilities. And there are thousands of these little ERPs for different verticals, and none of them are serviced the way, the big time ERPs are. Meaning, if you're running SAP, you have a $400 an hour SAP consultant, consultancy, like sitting around talking to management, right? Like that's just the way it works. But these smaller companies aren't as savvy, don't have the money, don't care, right? They're not as tech savvy, if you will. Does that help answer the question, or can I elaborate on part of that?
We got a good answer to the question. And that's the beauty of so Rachel has built a full bore machine learning and AI pipeline. So that's kind of the beauty of what she's able to do, is come in and connect all these different pieces together for small to mid-sized clients, and do things like data transfer and what have you efficiently.
Yeah. So that's light work for me, because I've really changed how I approach this work. And if I compare that to 8 years ago when I started my own company, right? Like for me to integrate into like I do a lot of web scraping. So, I scrape LinkedIn, Instagram, everything, right? If you pay me, I will scrape it. Unless, barring illegal activity, I will never do anything that's illegal. But, scraping is a big part of my job, right? And so I scrape from a lot of resources. And 8 years ago, that was very hard, right? But I can just simply supply the right context to generative AI, and it will do simple things like mapping for me, right? And writing simple Python scripts to do that translation, which isn't hard work, but it's time consuming. I mean, this is a group of developers. So, imagine that I have an API endpoint, and it's got a first name, last name, and date of birth, right? All those have individual data types. They all have their own validators, right? And so understanding and designing APIs quickly that can incorporate things like data types, mapping, all that is like just a giant shortcut. So when I think about synchronizing HubSpot and Point of Rental, like I'm just going to do that tomorrow, right? Like, and my client has already signed off on everything. So basically, I'm going to make my entire consulting fee tomorrow, right? So I can do that in a day now.
Super cool. So it's a Python user group we're speaking to here. So the first section I have in our little outline is introduction and the ML data challenge. So Rachel, you want to just give an overview of your pipeline and how you're solving these database issues, and just like maybe a loose application of how you're using Python to do that?
Absolutely. I'm going to pause for 1 second. I'm very thirsty and I don't have water. I made a mistake. Give me 1 second.
No problem. Really badass, cool home office setup and stuff that totally fits her bubblegum personality. It's the best.
Yeah, I like to have a fun environment. So
yeah, I think Rachel, you definitely have probably the best home office Zoom call setup I think I've ever seen.
I don't normally take calls out in my den/living room. This is just like a friendly developer chat. So normally this wouldn't be my, I mean, maybe if I want to set a vibe, I don't know. But anyway, thank you. Okay, so let me talk about the pipeline that I ended up building. Understand that I worked on this full time for roughly 6 years until ChatGPT came out, which changed everything for me. and I'll kind of work that into why. So 8 years ago, I started a company primarily focused on doing like automated marketing research. And that played out by, doing either deep learning, standard machine learning, or basic statistics, right? So think of it like, and forgive me, you have to go way back. So like throw your mind back to like 2017. So different world, pre-COVID, pre-Gen AI, all this stuff did not exist. Well, maybe COVID existed, who knows? In any case, most of what I learned from my clients is that they want me to tell them what to do, right? So mainly that whole company was built around telling marketing executives what to do. And I'll walk you through basically how that works, right? So again, you have to go back in the way, way back machine, think like 2018. So at that time, I had a customer, Texas Roadhouse. Is Texas Roadhouse in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So they were a client for 3 years. And basically what I did is I analyzed their social media, and then I told them what to do. And I tell them what to do by, in this case, I'll just give a concrete example. So I scrape all the Facebook posts and I scrape all the comments, right? So that means for each post, I'm going to use machine learning statistics, things of that nature to extract what's in that post, right? And I don't mean the date it was posted, the number of likes, and the number of shares. Everybody's doing that, right? Or everybody was doing that. So what I did was I created classifiers, right, around all that. So think of taking a social media post and figuring out what's in the image using deep learning, right? So is there a chicken? Is there a dog? Is there a ceiling? Are there lights? Is it inside? Is it outside? All those become important variables when I tell people what to do. And then, so think of it as taking the image or video content, and then I also pull out the language so I understand what's being talked about. And, there are some things that are simple, like, is this being posted around a holiday? Is this about a holiday, right? Because it turns out that posting around holidays is actually a really strong, was highly correlated for them with success. And, so think about it. I'm understanding what's in the text, when it was posted, what's in the image, what's in the video, right? What's in the audio, breaking down all these things across whatever metrics matter to them. And then I also take the comments, right? And I do a whole bunch of different things, right? But one of those things would be doing aspect-based sentiment, which used to be really hard. And aspect-based sentiment is like if you're working with like Texas Roadhouse, right? And a customer says, I enjoyed the food, but the service was bad. That's mixed sentiment, right? And so I would go beyond and say, there are two different things being expressed here. There is sentiment around the food, and there is sentiment around the service. And those are two different things we need to track. So think of me tracking this at the post level and at the comment level, and then I aggregate and I roll up. And then what that allows me to do in Texas Roadhouse's case was to change how they marketed. And what I told them is show people biscuits. Yeah. Anybody have? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying, anybody, the Texas Roadhouse, like honey bun things? Yeah, that's like the thing. That's their thing, right?
Right. So, but that
Or
plays
is
out. Yeah, that plays out in the data, right? So, I'm able to show you unknown unknowns and then provide statistical backup or reasoning for your decision. Meaning I went into senior marketing management at Texas Roadhouse and said, hey, you know what? Quit showing people gift certificates. They don't like that. Show them pictures of biscuits. Another like surprise finding for them was, hey, steaks, showing people pictures of steaks, even though you're a steak restaurant, doesn't do anything for you, right? So small insights like that can add up, and we were able to like turn around their entire social media marketing campaign based on data. And that, that's circa 2018-ish, right? Or, I did a Maker's Mark was a client. And so, again, you have to go back to the old days. I had to use deep learning to create, a specialized model that understood different bourbon bottles, right? So that I could count. They wanted to know how many people were posting pictures of their bourbon, right? So I did all kinds of little specialty things like that. So one of my big things that I do is fine tuning or bespoke research. And that's sort of like the old way. Ben, would you like for me to kind of describe how I'm doing things now, just so we can have a then versus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the more nuts and bolts, the better. We got a highly technical audience. So I think people are digging it.
Well, why don't we pause here and see if people have questions about the Texas Roadhouse example, and then I can, talk about current, maybe. Are there any questions around? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay. So the question is, back when you were running that example, like how long did it take you
To do what?
to do the analysis for the Texas Roadhouse, ingest all the
God.
data, scrape everything, contrast it to today?
Oh, it was a absolute utter root canal. Months worth of work, but they paid me, right? They paid a good bit of money, right? And so I even created a grading system for them. They got custom grades on their posts, right? So think of them spending $80,000 back in the day, right? So a lot of work. I actually landed a contract in February, right before COVID hit, in 2020. And that project took me 6 months to complete, which was great timing because COVID, right? And the analysis there was, it was a company that is a water bottle manufacturer. And so we did research to tell them how to market their new brand of water bottle. And so we would study like Nalgene and Yeti and all these other companies. And so yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so 6 to 8 months for the first pass in this example. So contrast that to today and how you built the pipeline up since then.
Yeah, I would say I could probably come up with the Texas Roadhouse thing from scratch. I got to think, because I had to build, like, the trick is with data science and these types of things, you're not just calling one model, right? Like, you're calling many models, and each call could be dependent on another call completing, right? Meaning, think about like me taking all the posts. So I have to take each post and run classifiers or do data extraction against it. And then that all has to roll up into another number. And all these numbers have to be right? So that was just really hard back then. And when I think about if I were to try to build the Texas Roadhouse solution from scratch, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, including a grading system and everything from scratch. So, 6 months down to 2 weeks. But I know all the tricks, right? It took me, 6 years of banging my head into a wall to know all the different tricks. And I can reapply those tricks over and over and over again.
Super cool. So taking that's a significant reduction in time. So how does what is your architecture looking like right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm currently working primarily in Cursor. And the process works roughly like this. I don't code anymore. I haven't written any code in over a month. And that's my goal, is to never write code again. If I have to write code, it means I'm not doing my job right, in my opinion, right? Other people may have different opinions, and that's okay. Because what I really learned when I was doing deep learning was that iteration speed is what matters, right? In many cases. And so, because I do research, I don't build software, I do research. And the outcome of my research can be a product or project, but it's research first. So with that mentality, right, what I do is, I'll give you an example. I personally have been collecting AI news that I find relevant for 8 years, right? Oh, I've been doing that for 8 years. And so I've recently gotten to the point where I needed my own personal opinion of how projects should be done and how AI should be approached, right? So what I did was I took all these links, right? For each link, let's say it's for the X platform. I go out, I scrape the post, and I download the media because, you know, people can delete stuff, and, you know, I want to make this about me having my data. So I scraped Twitter, and, you know, I was in 2 days, I was able to turn sort of a CSV with roughly 8,000 or more links in it into a data set and create a website. And I did that by giving Cursor access to the CSV and then beginning a conversation that is very constrained and is also uses TDD, right? So I personally found TDD to be very onerous when I was hand coding, but because I think of AI like a super smart intern that doesn't know how to build a full solution. And that's kind of where we are. And this is why multi-agent systems fail, right? Because there's every time it's a probabilistic model. So every time you ask a question, you could get a slightly different answer, right? And so I need consistency. And so that's why I constrain the system and give it and treat it like I'm a manager, basically, and telling, because it'll go off the rails, it'll make the wrong decisions, and it's my job to act as a manager and guide it and to constrain it because it doesn't know enough to do it right. And so my background in software engineering and in data science and also in understanding business, right? Like, how do I manage a virtual employee? And so that's kind of my mindset. And so think of it as like, hey, my end goal is to have a website where I can see and analyze all the AI news that I care about. Not that somebody else has curated for me, not that exists in somebody else's database, my own. This is my opinion, right? And this feeds into my building because, again, I have to constrain the AI, which means it needs as much good context as possible, and personalized context to show it how I want things done is key. So, you know, I have Cursor rules that, you know, try to force it to always do test-driven development. And so that way I can just be very explicit with rules, telling it exactly how I want things done. And if I see it going off the rails, like, I watch what it's saying. I use reasoning models, and I'm looking at the decisions it's making. And if it's making a bad decision, I will stop it and fix it. And, you know, again, the models are smart. It's, you know, maybe it can, you know, code, you know, do the best leak code, or not best. Let's say it does an adequate job of giving you leak code output, right? Because most stuff, it's an experiment, could be thrown away. It doesn't need to be like the fastest fast sort algorithm that's ever been created, right? And
Sure.
so, yeah,
Let me interject real quick. Is anybody here playing in the AI ML space at all? Okay, got a couple of hands here and here and here. What kind of projects are you guys working on or running right now?
I'm headed down the path like she's talking about where I'm getting into new projects and just trying to get AI to write most of the code so I don't have to learn it all. So I kind of am balancing where to let it write some code to get me far enough along to get what I need off the ground, and then figure out from there where I can get it.
Okay, super cool. Anybody else want to share real quick what they're working on? Okay, super cool. And you?
This is on back, it looks more front, but I've been using Hater. Everyone.
Okay.
It's software. You can have different projects with the AI keys, API keys. And just different projects.
Okay, super cool.
Hater, AIP.
So it looks like we got like a smattering of AI ML applications and whatnot.
Okay, I was not able to hear everybody, so I don't have a good overview. Could you summarize it real quickly as far as like what's being done? Or can somebody come on mic and do that just so I can make sure I understand?
Sorry, what did you say, Rachel? We're having a little technical glitch here.
Yeah, I was saying I was unable to hear what people said. And so if you want me to respond to it, I'm happy to. I didn't hear it.
Oh, sure. So we had kind of a smattering of AI ML applications from people looking like working on some no-code solutions, working on some fine-tuning of language models. But the question I had though is like, do you have any like advice or information on different types of databases or storage that people working on these applications might be interested in?
Yeah, sure. So I've been, data storage is like, it's always a question, right? So back in the day, from like a data science perspective, I stored everything in CSVs, right? Or JSON or some kind of like file system based thing, generally CSVs, because that's what, Python, pandas, standard data science is a bunch of CSVs. CSVs are messy and it's hard to, maintain relationships and do things like that. So generally, if I care about something, which I tend to, and now with generative AI, it's so easy, right? Because like, think of like, if I'm going to call an LLM, right? Because I do a lot of like classification or information extraction. And so when I'm doing information extraction, I use a library called Cursor. Is anybody familiar with Cursor? I mean,
Yep,
sorry.
we got a couple of people.
Instructor. I meant instructor.
Yep, we got a few people.
Okay, yeah. So like I'm a big fan of instructor, and it's great because that way I can force the model to give me structured output. And that's like job number one for me in most cases, right? How do I get structured data out of unstructured data? And that's what I focused on for a long time. So that's like a trick I go back to over and over again. So because I'm using instructor to force the model to give me a object, right? It's easy for me to get AI to map that object directly into a database. And by following this path, I can have like a full relational database sort of generated for me and everything stored appropriately, which makes my downstream tasks easier because again, I'm generally rolling things up or running queries or doing things like that. So having organized structured data is important. I am an open source person by nature. I do not do well in a corporate environment. I need to kind of like do things my way. And so I tend to work with open source technologies, and Postgres is a just universally great database, right? But, there could be specialized cases. Like I was scraping all the properties in the United States from a website that has those, right? And so I use DuckDB. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. Right now, I'm really about iteration speed and being hyper productive. So I store everything in, I think it's pronounced Super or SUPA base, which is just like a cloud-based Postgres that is like built for integration with AI, right? And so it just makes my life easy. And so I default to that. So for example, my little app that I was talking about, it's really nice because I can just push my data into that. And then I can also push all my images in, and it will host the images, meaning like blobs and other things like that, and serve them for me. So, it was always a problem because I would scrape like, let's say Instagram, and then I would have a bunch of Instagram photos that I don't want to display on the internet because they're from Instagram. And so I would have to restrict access and figure out how to do that. And it was just hard because maybe I would store that in S3 and use RDS. So there are just like a million different database options. Right now, just again, for pure iteration speed, super or Supabase, however you pronounce that, if you have enterprise type constraints, I've had really good luck, whether that's on Azure or AWS running Postgres, on the AWS side on RDS. And, I scaled, it's not really huge, but, I have like 150 gigabyte. Yeah. 150 gig database, which is not a lot, but but I have 10 gigs worth of images in S3. So images, video, audio. So, I use a hybrid approach, but if I'm just iterating quickly, Supabase and storing like blobs, structured data there.
Super cool. Well, hey, so we're kind of moving into the last little bit here. I don't want to take up. Sure. Okay. Hey, Rachel, we got to spin up a new Google Meet thing, so we'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, super cool. While we're waiting on a new fresh meeting link and all that kind of stuff, anybody else experiencing similar things with like the low code, no code, trying to pursue that? I hate junior developers. Let's make it so they can't start. This is the last generation of computer science majors that get jobs, right? Baby gate into a wood chipper. Yeah, that's how my house is set up. What do you mean? Yeah, that's actually perfect. Yeah, gosh, I'm not. I think that, me coming to the tech industry from like a slightly different angle, it's kind of astonishing to see like what I'm capable of doing. Working with somebody like Rachel, who's a super genius, computer science stuff, of being able to like feed her data and then have her, outsource like this grunt work to these different AI tools and whatnot, and being able to like iterate and just keep making stuff, without being roadblocked. Sure. It doesn't catch up to there fast enough to make it worth it.
Yeah, I have limited programming knowledge, but and then I'm getting into like areas of like, okay, that's really stretching the boundaries of what I can do. But I use the autocomplete that Copilot does, right? When you're typing a line or whatever, like I know what I want to do, so I start to head down that path of, well, if this variable, no, let's just finish it out, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I probably would have like missed that one piece of it, or I would have missed like a, you know, bracket over here or something. And then I go to the next line and it guesses again, right? It's like, yeah, that's what you want to do, Brian. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. So I mean, I'm not in a, you know, intense corporate environment where it's going to like, you know, be critical that something's, you know, horribly wrong, but I'm getting along much faster and not fighting all those little battles of like, oh, you forgot to end that whatever up there at the top, and now you're screwed for 10 hours, you know? So it's been super quickly go through these.
Cool. Well, hey, so Rachel just joined us back. Don't want to go too long here. Does anybody have any questions for Rachel? I know we kind of like went a little bit all over the place today, doing you know, kind of meandering a little bit, but
I'm curious about just the last thing
he jumped your question, but I'm just.
I was just curious your thoughts on specifically advice talking. It was specifically my question related to data scraping. I have tried some things before with some different AI tools, but essentially I eventually want to gather every piece of information for every pet food in the world. It's very possible, but I haven't really found a good way to find information online in a consistent manner and to get it all into format that you can put in a database. So I'd be curious on if she was doing something like that.
Sure. Rachel, did you get any of that question?
I heard part of it, but if you could summarize just so that I don't lose part of the context.
So I have a lovely person here wearing a very nice Cubs hoodie. Go Cubs. He's wanting to know, how would one go about scraping pet food information, like every single type of pet food that's out there, and putting it into a database. It's a project he's working on.
Okay. Well, I would say that when you say everything, that, wow, you know, everything is everything. So you're not going to scrape everything. So the first part would be defining what data sources you care about, right? And so I would start off with that. You know, Ben, you and I work together on this a lot. I mean, Reddit is a really, really wonderful resource for real reviews on things. I have scraped a lot of Amazon. A lot of Amazon reviews don't move the needle, right? So the first and most important step always is the data. And so in my pipeline, and Ben knows this very well, and after we're off of here, he can explain this very well because we worked together on this for, I don't know, a minute, Ben. You know, it's been, yeah. So Ben does understand the data gathering process, but that's the key. Because if you get the wrong data, you're going to get the wrong answers, right? So if you would like for Ben or I to help you learn how to do that first piece of research, you know, I'm happy to set up, like one-on-ones where we could like learn, do a like deep dive into how I'm using Cursor or how I find data sources. But yeah, so first step is always data. So get some data, you know, look at the data, understand what's in the data. I can, you know, show you the basic techniques for doing that. You know, things like clustering, summaries, topic analysis, like all these things, right? I can give you this playbook. It's hard for me to articulate them all here, you know, in a consistent fashion. So, you know, sorry, my dog was distracting me. So, you know, that would be the first step, is defining the data, understanding where you're getting it. You know, let's just say we figure out that there are, you know, 600 posts on Reddit that we care about. And maybe you care about SKUs and different product variants. So maybe we scrape Amazon. I have scrapers for both of those. And when I say I mean, you can, I use a service called Rapid API. And Rapid API has just every potential scraper you might want, or you can pay somebody to create one, or you can create your own, right? Scraping is a whole art in and of itself. So, we could have a discussion about how you actually do scraping. Services like Rapid API will make it easy. So you can scrape Reddit, you can scrape Amazon, you can do all these things. And I've done, all the types of work to figure out what are the actual product offerings on Amazon. And that requires, scraping different data, getting structured data out, categorizing it, all that kind of thing. And then, I run that through my pipeline, and then I'm able to tell you special things. Like, I had a customer. Do you guys know duct tape? Are you familiar with that product?
Oh yeah.
I figured you guys are in Iowa, so that it seems I'm from Kentucky, so it's like a practical, part of the country, and people know what that is. So anyway, duct tape was a customer, Duck Brand duct tape, whatever. There are many different variants, but I pulled every, different type of duct tape that's sold on Amazon and some other sites. And then I also pulled like a bunch of Reddit reviews, right? And one thing that my customer wanted to know was, how do people use duct tape? And I don't know how you all would address answering that question, but the way I address it is by doing task analysis, meaning taking everything that was said and delineating the finite number of different tasks that are used. And for duct tape, I don't know, that was a big list, right? Like people use duct tape for a lot of stuff. Whereas, you may only use motor oil for a couple of different things, right? So understanding where to look for signal based on what your client's needs are is really the name of the game. So understanding what's in the data and understanding what your client's objective is. And so if you wanted to delve into that question in more detail, I could put some more parameters around that, because
Super cool. High level. I'll give you Rachel's email to follow up with her, because this sounds like super in the scope that she could help you get started on this. Awesome. Cool. And then you had a question, Melissa?
Yeah, I was just curious about, she was talking about loading her data and images into Supabase. And where has she found that AI just can't get there yet? Like, is it able to then look into Supabase and run analysis, or does she have to pull stuff out of there to give it to the AI in this format? Like, where is she getting stuff, or is AI basically able to touch all these platforms at this point?
Okay. Do you get a good overview of that, Rachel?
Yeah. So, I do not pull the data locally. If I need to analyze the data that's in the database, I will have it issue SQL queries. And, when you're asking like, where does it break down? Typically, like it will, there's always a probability it's going to lie to you, right? Which is, again, why I'm test driven. Because if I have a test, it can't lie. And that's what I love about coding. And that's why I think that if you're able to code and you are able to work with AI and you can understand a business, that's like a superpower, right? And so, there are these edge cases where it's going to break down. Like it will fundamentally misunderstand a database relationship, or delete data, or lie to you about it, right? So I have all this test-driven stuff where I have it execute SQL. I understand what the data is going to look like, right? Because it will screw that up. And then it can't put together a whole system. You're not going to be able, you have to know how to code right now, right? Multi-agent systems are fantasy right now, right? Because there's always a probability it's going to lie. And so if you have 10 agents, or 10 AI calls, the probability of failure at any one of those steps is high. So you have to have rigor around testing and understanding. And so it all starts with test-driven development and constraints and looking for these edges, and then guiding it, meaning like I did something the other day. It was literally going to delete all my data out of the database. And that was like hundreds of thousands of rows, because it will screw stuff like that up all day. So, you have to watch it and give it direction, understanding that, generally speaking, if you tell it, I need to map A to B, it will be very good at that. But if you say, hey, I want a web app that's written in fast HTML that uses Supabase, I don't even know how to say it, but it's going to screw that up. So you have to be able to articulate the architecture and then watch it like a hawk as it makes these individual steps, because it will just screw up randomly, right? When you least expect it, and in devastating ways potentially. So is that
that's not like fun advice, but it's good advice. Got to know what you're doing, and you got to watch it like a hawk. Cool.
Well,
Any other thoughts, questions?
we're developers, right? Like, this is actually good news for us in the sense of, like, if you understand how to code and you understand how to build a real system, and then you can understand how to work with AI, then it's like being granted a superpower. Because, again, like when I did my first mapping, my first scraping of Instagram, for example, I used to write in this language called Elixir, and it took me like 2 weeks to integrate with an API, right? Because it was, recursive calls and, because of threaded comments, like it was a mess, right? But now I could do that in like an hour, right? Because I can set up AI properly by giving it the proper context, which means, hey, I have to go get the API documentation and make sure that's in a format that's readable and usable by the AI, right? And so being able to set up context and work through that is like the new skill. Because again, I'm not coding it. I'm making sure that my agent has the right information. And that my expert opinion as a developer, architect, and everything else is where my value comes in now, right? Because I've been doing this for a long time. And I know like good architectural design and what test-driven development it is, right? And those are the kinds of constraints you have to wrap around this to keep it from going off the rails, because it will go off the rails, right? I can deliver a final solution that doesn't go off the rails, right? Like I built after ChatGPT came out, I wanted to, work in enterprise because I needed lots of money. Because at the time I was running open source servers, running open source models on servers that were like 30 or 40 grand a month, right? And, you have to like go back in the time machine. And we were doing this because it was, they had PII and PHI, and we had to be super secure. So we ran our own models, and that just cost a lot of money back then. That's not really a constraint anymore, although, I spend thousands of dollars of my clients' money on different types of AI. Sorry, I feel like I'm going far afield, so I'm just going to shut up and see if that, like,
All good.
I tend to ramble.
That was just a head scratch, not a hand. Darn it. Anybody
Yeah.
else? Anything you want to add? Say something, show how smart you are. Cool, awesome. Well, Rachel, I think I'll probably wrap things up here and let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Great talk. I really appreciate sharing your perspective.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn or, Ben, feel free to share my contact info, and I'm happy to discuss AI, your use cases, because like it's not, it's an educational process for me. So I want to hear about your problems. What's stopping you, what your customers or, whether that's internal or external are thinking about. Like I love to collect use cases and understand how people are trying to apply this. And, if you want to talk about like Cursor or Claude Code, or, how you can use Vim with, from CLI stuff, like technical stuff around that, or just getting like SOPA base running, or, how do I iterate quickly? Like, let me know. I'm happy to discuss these things.
Super cool. Well, I'll take a chance to plug our community Discord that everybody should be joining in. I'll drop Rachel's contact info in there, and we can keep this conversation going if you need a resource in your back pocket. So sounds good. All right, quick round of applause for Rachel. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
All right.
Later, Rach.
Cool beans. Thus ends this portion of the evening. That was pretty fun. Thanks for listening, guys.